a slayer of those wicked beasts in the night that so few can steal the courage to defend against. The Jaeger masters blade and gun alike to masterfully take down such abominations. Skilled in the art of hunting and tracking down the monsters of the realm, as well as resisting the mental corruption that madness would bring, Jaegers are quite literally engineered to face the darkness of any fantasy realm, clearing a trail of hope in the overgrown thickets of fear to guide the people of this world back to the light. The Jaeger is entirely based off of the hunters from the Bloodborne series, and the designer translated their abilities and the mechanics from the game very faithfully into Dungeons & Dragons. It is easily one of, if not my favorite custom class. In my opinion, it perfectly blends combat-oriented abilities with features designed more for roleplay, which is rarely done well if it's even done at all for martial classes. With the Jaeger being based off of the hunters from Bloodborne, they are designed to work with wielding both a gun and a melee weapon at the same time, one in each hand. I love the playstyle that this opens up for combat, but it obviously raises some concerns for specific campaign settings which might want to avoid guns because, well, they don't exist in that world. But don't let that dissuade you from choosing a Jaeger for your campaign, because it's designed to work perfectly one way or the other. While it is designed with wielding a firearm and a melee weapon at once in mind, and it even includes its own firearm stat blocks and rules which are heavily recommended to be used if your Jaeger does wield a firearm, it does by no means force you to use this combination of weapons, and it's no weaker or stronger with or without the use of firearms or dual wielding. The Jaeger is an incredibly versatile martial class with a plethora of abilities that allow you to build it in pretty much whatever way you want to. You can easily wield a crossbow in place of a gun, you can dual wield melee weapons if you want, you can dual wield guns if you want, or you can just wield a massive clunky two-handed weapon if you want to. All of these are valid options for this class, and it offers plenty of fighting styles with its other features that'll give you more than enough wiggle room to build it however works best for you and your campaign. When you create your Jaeger, you want to make sure your highest abilities are Dexterity, followed by Constitution, and then Intelligence. It uses a D8 hit die, making it somewhat vulnerable for a martial class, but as we'll see, its most crucial features allow for high mobility and the ability to dodge attacks and minimize damage. At its core, the Jaeger's playstyle is based around three mechanics that synergize with one another very well. These are Focus, Momentum, and Finishers. In short, Focus is a class-specific resource similar to Ki for monks, which is now, funnily enough, also called Focus in D&D 2024. These focus points are spent on new abilities called Focus Arts. All Focus Arts only require you to spend one focus point to activate them. You'll start with 2 Focus Arts, called Weapon Parry and Dodge Step, and as you level up, you'll get to choose from a selection of other Focus Arts that your Jaeger can use. These are usually used as reactions or bonus actions, and mostly have combat utility, but a creative player can make the most of certain Focus Arts that enhance your mobility to reach new heights, chase down a thief, and plenty more. Now we move on to Momentum. Momentum is another class-specific resource used in combat, which is represented with Momentum Dice. By carrying out certain actions that keep the flow of combat going, such as ending your turn next to an enemy, spending the aforementioned focus points, or simply by making attacks, you will gradually gain more and more Momentum Dice. But what are these Momentum Dice used for? Well, Jaegers have access to a special attack known as a Finisher, which allows you to spend and roll all of your momentum dice that you've accumulated at once to deal massive damage to your enemies. But of course there are multiple types of finishers that you can choose from as you level up, and each of them makes use of the momentum dice they expend in a unique way. So hopefully now you can see what the core gameplay loop of the Jaeger looks like in combat. You'll use your mobility and versatile weaponry and your focus arts to continuously put pressure on the enemy, dealing steady damage over time and using your reactions to avoid taking damage yourself. By doing so, you're going to gradually build up your momentum, and once you feel that you have enough, you spend all of it at once on a lethal finisher to take out a big threat, or, depending on the finisher, you can take out many smaller enemies. Then you'll rinse and repeat until you stand victorious. So, obviously, the Jaeger performs well in combat, as I would hope any martial class would, but unlike other martial classes like the fighter, barbarian, or monk, the Jaeger has a handful of unique features that lend themselves to situations outside of combat. Now, every player can of course participate outside of combat through roleplay regardless of what class they're playing, but when it comes to creative problem solving in scenarios where players have to discover clues, solve puzzles, interrogate NPCs, and explore, roleplaying can only get you so far. And as a martial class, often the only abilities you really have access to outside of that are breaking down doors or, intimidation. And I get that's supposed to be the weak point of combat-centric classes like the Fighter, Monk, and Barbarian, but I do believe that every class should offer at least a small handful of abilities that can be utilized in every pillar of gameplay. They don't need to and shouldn't excel as much as a class that specializes in those particular pillars outside of combat, but every class I feel should be relevant at all points of the game. And thankfully with the Jaeger, you don't really have to worry about that. And these extra abilities it gives you don't step on the toes of other players who have a focus on versatility, being a skill monkey, or creative problem solving. And they don't feel like random add-ons to beef up the Jaeger's kit either. Everything is done flavorfully and faithfully to the idea behind the class. The first such feature you'll gain is called Eldritch Hunter, which allows you to add your proficiency bonus to checks made to track certain types of creatures. And if you're already proficient in that skill, your proficiency bonus is doubled. At 3rd level, you gain Piercing Gaze, which lets you temporarily gain dark vision and the ability to see through magical darkness, an ability useful both inside and outside of combat, especially when searching through any dungeon ever because they're almost never fully lit. This also incentivizes you further to pick any race you want, as you don't have to worry about being the only member in your party that can't see in the dark. And at 7th level, this feature also allows you to see invisibility, which, once again, very useful in and out of combat. And at 4th level, you gain my favorite of these utility features, Seasoned Survivor, which gives you advantage on investigation checks to find secret passages, interpret markings and messages left on various surfaces by other creatures, and when determining the fate of creatures by examining their bloodstains and remains. Which, yes, this feature is literally just the messages and bloodstain system from the Soulsborne series, but man does it lend itself well to D&D. So as you can see, very cool stuff. These features give you a lot of freedom in how they can be used in the other pillars of gameplay while not stepping on the other player's toes, and staying faithful to the theme of a monster hunter. As you level up, you gain the classic choice of a fighting style to further customize your Jaeger, and 2 of these fighting styles are actually custom made for this class. In addition to some of the usual fighting styles you've probably seen before, such as great weapon fighting, 2-weapon fighting, etc., you have flexible fighting and focused fighting. Flexible fighting allows you to engage in 2-weapon fighting with weapons that can each be held in one hand, regardless of whether they have the light property or not. It also gives a +1 damage bonus to each of those weapons. And focused fighting simply lets you learn an additional focus art and gain an additional focus point. Moving forward, you'll of course get some classic feats like an extra attack and evasion, but you'll also gain some unique ones like Hunter's Pursuit, which lets you spend focus to move for free at the start of your turn, and Lethal Momentum, which increases your momentum upon killing an enemy. Your mind will eventually become hardened to the horrors that you face every day, and you will become more resilient to being charmed and frightened, as well as gaining madness if you're using the Steinhardt's madness system, which I would highly recommend for any setting making use of this class, or just any dark and eldritch fantasy setting in general that your DM might be brewing up. And last but not least, the Capstone ability. At level 20, you gain the feat Always Ready. Now, compared to many other capstone abilities, upon first read, Always Ready may seem a bit disappointing. But trust me when I tell you that this ability is just as powerful as any other capstone, if not more so. Once per round, at the beginning of each of your turns, you gain an additional reaction, which can only be used for focus arts that require a reaction to use. And, after using this reaction, you regain the focus point spent. Honestly, having an additional reaction at all is incredibly powerful, and if you truly know how to make the most of your reaction, it becomes even more so. The Jaeger wants to use their focus arts as often as they can, especially their weapon parry and dodge step, and by gaining a dedicated reaction for these abilities, as well as getting a refund on them, you can double up the number of focus arts you perform every round, or you can even use a reaction for a focus art when you need it, and save the other reaction for something like an opportunity attack or for readying an action. This capstone adds even more versatility and creative use cases for the Jaeger's abilities and combat style, and it only grows more useful the more a player actually knows how to take full advantage of their reactions. Now let's get into the subclasses. The Jaeger comes with 5 subclasses that are called chapters. First, we have the Absolute chapter, the true ideal of what a Jaeger stands for. This is the quintessential vanilla subclass of the Jaeger, like what the champion subclass is to the fighter, or the berserker is to the barbarian. But that's not to say that it's weak, or even boring to play. It has all-around good feats that improve upon the core mechanics and gameplay of the base kit, such as improving your weapon parry to have a chance to damage the enemy attacking you when you use it. It also gives you more movement speed and increases the distance you can move with your dodge step, and gives you advantage on attack rolls after using your focus arts. At the later levels, you'll be able to ignore difficult terrain when using your Hunter's Pursuit, as well as climb and swim without expending extra movement while using it. And this chapter's capstone ability, which is at level 17, lets you declare a hunt without requiring an action. This gives you the effects of the Freedom of Movement spell, and doubles the momentum you gain for each focus point you spend for the next minute. I also wanted to mention a really simple yet unique ability this chapter gives called Encircling Strike, which you get at 7th level, because it makes use of movement and positioning in a way that I feel you don't often see in the official books. Whenever you move to the opposite side of an enemy from where you started on your turn, or if you move to the opposite side of the enemy from one of your allies, the next melee attack against it deals additional damage. It's very simple, but it is something that I really like about it. It creates a flanking mechanic that plays into the high mobility of the Jaeger and rewards taking into account your positioning during combat without overcomplicating it. Because oh my god, in my opinion, Dungeons & Dragons needs something to make movement more interesting in combat. It feels like no matter how much difficult terrain or how many obstacles or levels of varying heights you add to a battle map, players either have more than enough movement to just cluster up by the enemies, make their melee and ranged attacks, and stay put for the rest of the game, or they don't have enough movement and have to spend an entire turn dashing up to the enemies just to do what I said previously on all of their subsequent turns. But that's a rant for another day. Maybe I'm just a bad DM, who knows. All around, the Absolute is a great chapter for anyone using the Jaeger for the first time, or who really wants to go full send on that Bloodborne monster hunter idea. Next, we have the Heretic, a Jaeger who partook in taboo rituals, the ingesting of strange chemicals, or grafted powers into their very soul to give them access to dark magics and abilities. You learn 2 cantrips and 2 first-level spells from the Warlock spell list, and learn a few more as you level up. Wonder what cantrips people will choose with this chapter. You gain a unique focus art called Spell Flurry, which lets you spend a focus point after casting a spell to make an attack as a bonus action. You also gain the ability to teleport instead of moving when using certain Jaeger features that would allow you to move without expending any movement, such as your dodge step. At 14th level, your spells will be able to increase your momentum, and at 17th level, you can unleash the darkness within yourself to dim the light around you, grow wings made of darkness, become heavily obscured by whirling shadows, and gain resistance to non-magical, non-silvered bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing damage. Next up, the Marauder, a brute that embodies a Jaeger's ferocity and will. As I said earlier in the video, the Jaeger is a very versatile class when it comes to combat, and it's designed to work well with a firearm in one hand and a melee weapon in the other. This chapter disregards that and is all about wielding massive, brutish, two-handed weapons and laying waste to every enemy it comes across. Starting off, you gain a unique finisher called Great Cleave that lets you attack multiple enemies around you at once, and refills your momentum for each enemy that you kill with it to keep the slaughter going. While wielding a two-handed weapon, you gain a bonus to your AC, and your momentum dice are increased by 1 step. At level 7, you get to deal extra damage to creatures when you attack them directly after charging towards them, or as you fall on them. At 14th level, your finishers become more effective, especially against larger creatures. And at 17th level, what's better than one two-handed weapon? That's right, dual-wielding two-handed weapons. And they deal extra damage. And your finishers double your momentum dice when used, once per long rest. But still, that is awesome. Next up, Salvation. This chapter is all about honing your piety and devotion to heal your allies and push back the darkness. You gain a unique focus art called Prayer of Salvation, which lets you heal and give temporary hit points to yourself and an ally as a bonus action. Whenever one of your allies reaches 0 hit points, you regain focus. At 7th level, you can emit sunlight from your body whenever you expend a focus point, which obviously produces light, but since it's sunlight, it also triggers debuffs for creatures with sunlight sensitivity such as drow and kobolds, or sunlight hypersensitivity for creatures like vampires. but this light also heals allies that enter it or start their turn within its radius. At 14th level, your Prayer of Salvation is buffed, healing for more, targeting an additional ally, and removing certain negative status effects. And lastly, at 17th level, you can unleash a blinding light for the next minute that buffs your Sanctifying Light feature to bless those within it and prevent them from dying, and buffs your Prayer of Salvation, allowing you to regain the focus point you expended on it when used. And lastly, we have the Sanguine, which, as the name suggests, holds power over blood, draining their opponent's health and placing blood hexes on them to weaken them. They have a lot of abilities that care about you or your enemies being bloodied, which is a term that I believe was introduced in Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, which is used to describe a character who is at half their max HP or less. The Sanguine chapter is focused around a unique finisher you gain at 3rd level called Blood Drain, which deals necrotic damage and heals you based on the value of the momentum dice expended to use it. And if you use it on a bloodied creature, or a creature with an effect causing it to bleed, you regain a focus point. You also gain a focus point and a momentum point whenever you become bloodied with a 1-minute cooldown. So you can't just heal, take damage, heal, and repeat it to keep gaining momentum and focus. At 7th level, you gain access to Blood Hex, which gives you 3 effects to use on your enemies who fail the saving throw against your blood drain. By spending a focus point, you can deal additional damage, force them to move, or reduce their speed. At 14th level, you gain access to upgraded versions of the previous Blood Hex abilities, which are more powerful but cost 2 focus points to activate. And at 17th level, you become more powerful while bloodied, giving you more speed, more attacks, increased healing for your Jaeger abilities, and a new focus arc called Blood Craze that lets you spend a focus point when your HP is reduced to 0 to come back at 1 HP instead. Now DMs beware, it even states in the document that this ability synergizes a little too well at level 20, as the Always Ready capstone ability makes it so that a Sanguine Jaeger can use Blood Craze twice in a round, meaning you'll have to kill them twice in a round to keep them down, which honestly may be one of the least broken things a DM has to deal with at level 20, but it's still something to note. So there we have it, the Jaeger. If you're interested in trying it out for yourself, you can purchase Steinhardt's Guide to the Eldritch Hunt on Monkey DM's website, linked in the description below. It has tons of other custom content like new subclasses, spells, enemies, weapons, loot, and more that I plan to cover on this channel in the future. I hope I was able to show you something new that fuels your imagination and expands your horizons. And most of all, I hope you're doing well. See you in the next one.